You know, it's funny how a smell can just about knock the wind out of you. I was baking yesterday, just a little apple pie for Sunday supper, and the moment that cinnamon hit the air, well, land sakes alive, it took me straight back. Not to the kitchen where I learned to bake, not to Mama's hands flooring the counter. No, it took me to a little porch in Savannah, Georgia. Summer of 1973. The air was thick with jasmine, and my heart, oh, honey, it was even thicker with questions. I was sitting on the edge of my mama's swing, holding a letter in one hand and a ring in the other. You see, that ring should have made me feel lucky, should have made me feel chosen. But all I felt was heavy, like that little diamond was pressing down on the rest of my life. And I knew, deep down, as sure as fireflies come out after dusk, that something in me wasn't settling right. Now, I ain't told many people the story. Not all of it. Not the way it really happened. Some things you tuck away for decades, like letters in a cedar box, waiting for the day you feel brave enough to open them. And yesterday, standing in that kitchen with my pie and my memories, I thought, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time I told her. The girl I used to be. Back in my day, girls like me didn't always get to ask big questions. We were raised to be sweet, polite, merry, nice, and make a fine pot roast. That's just how we did it in those days. And Lord have mercy, I tried to play the part. I really did, smiling at the church socials, saying, "Yes, ma'am," and "No, sir," folding napkins into little swans for the engagement dinner. But inside, I was starting to hear a different kind of voice, my own. So here I am, all these years later, 65 and some change. I got wrinkles where dimples used to be, and I drink my coffee black now. But let me tell you something, there ain't a day that goes by I don't think about that summer. About that version of me. Long skirt, sandals, hair down past my waist, thinking she had to have it all figured out by 20. Bless her heart. There are 3 things I'd tell her if I could sit beside her now. Just 3. Not rules, not advice from a soapbox. Just gentle truths, the kind that take a lifetime to learn. And if you're listening right now, maybe they're for you too. Maybe you're sitting in your own kind of swing, figuring out whether to stay or go, to say, I do, or I can't, to be the good girl, or be the real you. So pull up a chair, pour a little tea, or wine if you'd rather. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna share something I've carried in my bones for over 40 years. And it all started with a ring I didn't want. Well now, if I close my eyes just right, I can still hear the screen door creaking open on that old white house where I grew up. On 8th Street, right off Victory Drive. Savannah, Georgia. That house had chipped paint, a porch swing that sang louder than the cricket some nights, and a little kitchen that always smelled like something was about to come out of the oven. We weren't rich, Lord knows. We didn't have a pot to pee in, but we had laughter, and hot cornbread, and a daddy who'd dance me around the linoleum floor when his favorite song came on the radio. My world was small, but it was full. I was the youngest of 3 girls, always trailing behind my big sisters, trying to be just like Em. Mama said I was the tender one, heart wide open, cried at the drop of a hat, always bringing home strays, cats, kids, birds with broken wings. I believed, with every ounce of my 10-year-old soul, that kindness was the most important thing a person could be. And I truly thought that if you were good to people, they'd always come back. Back then, the days were slower. Summers stretched out like molasses on a hot plate. We'd pick wild blackberries behind the church, and I'd sit under the magnolia tree out back with my knees scraped up and my notebook open, writing poems I never showed a soul. I had this whole idea in my head about what life was supposed to be: get married young, have kids, cook Sunday dinners, maybe teach 2nd grade like Miss Clara from down the road. That was the dream. But dreams change, Or maybe they start to breathe on their own when you're not looking. I didn't know it then, but deep down, a little voice was whispering to me. Something different. I wanted more, not more things, not fancy, but more life. More space to ask questions, to say, what if? To be seen not just as someone's daughter or someone's wife, but as someone all her own. Still, when I turned 16, I started going steady with a boy named Raymond. He was sweet, polite, came from a family who owned a hardware store. Mama just adored him. Said he was husband material, dependable, God-fearing, wore clean shoes. And don't get me wrong, he was a good man. But I was still a girl. A girl who hadn't yet figured out that being loved by someone else don't mean much if you don't even know how to love yourself. By the time I hit 20, I was wearing his ring. Gold band, single diamond, just like the one in the catalog. Folks said I was lucky. Said I'd done well. And I smiled. Of course I smiled. That's what we did. We smiled even when our hands were trembling. We said yes even when our hearts whispered no. I didn't hate my life. I wasn't miserable. But I was hollow in places I didn't know how to fill. And that feeling, that quiet ache in the pit of your stomach when everything looks fine from the outside, but inside, you're drifting, that's the loneliest kind of feeling there is. But before all that, before the doubts, before the ring, there was this girl. Me. Bright-eyed, barefoot, with a head full of dreams and a notebook full of poems, believing the world would always be gentle if I just stayed gentle too. And that girl, she's still here, you know. Tucked inside the woman I became. Still whispering sometimes. Still hoping. It was a Tuesday evening, late April, the kind where the sky turns soft like peaches and syrup, and the whole world smells like it's about to bloom. I'd just come home from the dress shop downtown. Mrs. Lila had pinned my hem for the engagement dress, and Mama was humming in the kitchen, flipping cornbread in her iron skillet like she'd done 1,000 times. Everything looked the way it was supposed to look. Sounded right. Smelled right. But inside me, something shifted. And I didn't know why, not yet. The ring on my finger was just a little too snug that night. Funny how jewelry can start to feel like a question mark instead of a promise. I was sitting on the porch steps, picking at the lace on my dress, when Raymond pulled up in his daddy's Chevy. He got out with that same boyish grin, the kind that made church ladies wink and whisper, and handed me a single yellow rose. Said he saw it and thought of me. Sweet, wasn't it? Thoughtful. But when I looked at that rose, I felt nothing. Not even a flicker. We sat there, talking about the wedding, about what kind of punch we wanted for the reception, him leaning toward lemonade, me pretending to care. But I wasn't really listening. My eyes kept wandering across the street to Miss Lula's house. That's when I saw her. Not Miss Lula. Her niece, Caroline. She'd just come down from Atlanta to stay for the summer. Said she needed a change of pace. Well, honey, the moment I laid eyes on her, I knew something was different. She had this wild hair that didn't try to behave, long and curly and free. Wore trousers to church, if you can believe it. Spoke her mind, too. Didn't matter if the preacher was listening. She carried herself like she didn't owe the world an explanation for anything. And Lord have mercy, I'd never seen a woman like that up close. I couldn't stop staring. Not because I wanted to be her, exactly, but because I wanted to feel what she looked like she felt, free. A few days later, we ended up talking at the Piggly Wiggly. I gone in for milk and came out with a head full of fire. She asked me what I wanted to do after the wedding, and I laughed and said, I guess I'll make a home. And she just blinked, like that wasn't a real answer. Like she was waiting for me to say more. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about how she didn't lower her voice when she spoke, how she didn't ask permission to be. And I wondered, for the first time, What would my life look like if I stopped trying to make everyone else comfortable and just followed that flicker inside me? Now I ain't saying Caroline changed my life in one conversation, but she cracked the window, let a little air in, made me question whether the path I was on was mine, or just the one I'd been walked onto since I was tall enough to set the table. You know, I still remember the way she said goodbye that summer, like she knew I wasn't ready yet, but I would be. And bless her, she was right. Sometimes a person walks into your life not to stay, but to stir the pot, to shake the dust, to remind you that you don't have to sit quiet your whole life. And that yellow rose Raymond gave me, I pressed it between the pages of my Bible. It's still there. But Caroline, she's in the pages of my story. Lord, I still remember the way Mama looked at me that Sunday morning after I told her. Her hands froze mid-stir in the grits, and she didn't say a word, not for a whole minute. Just stared at me with those eyes that could burn straight through cotton. And then, real quiet, she said, Edna May Hollister, don't you dare break that boy's heart. That's all. Not, are you all right? Not, tell me what you're feeling, Dot. Just, don't you dare. I'd told her I was thinking about postponing the wedding. Just postponing. Mind you, not cancelin', not running off with the circus. But you think I'd said I was planning to rob the church blind? She got real still, like I'd shamed the whole family just by asking a question. And in that kitchen, with the smell of bacon and starch in the air, my stomach turned to knots. The days that followed were hard. Folks noticed right away. Word spreads quick in a town like Savannah, especially when a good, God-fearing boy like Raymond ends up sitting alone in a pew. Mrs. D from choir cornered me after service and said, Honey, what on earth's gotten into you? Don't you know girls would kill for a man like that? As if I was ungrateful. As if happiness came with a checklist and a white dress. Raymond came by one evening, flowers in hand, lilies this time, not roses. He looked confused more than angry. Bless him. Asked if I'd changed my mind, 'cause of Caroline. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't even seen her in a week. But her existence had stirred something in me. Not because I wanted her life, but because I realized I never really imagined my own. He said he loved me, said he'd wait, said maybe I was just overwhelmed. And maybe I was, maybe I still am. But something in my chest had started to shift, and I couldn't unfeel it. I cried that night. Not quiet tears, the ugly kind. Curled up in my room, with Mama in the next room talking to Aunt Ruth on the phone like I was already a scandal. No, she won't say what's wrong, just says she's not sure. What does that even mean at her age? I didn't have the words back then, not the way I do now. I just knew I felt like I was drowning in a life that hadn't even started. The dress fittings, the guest lists, the casseroles, it all felt like a parade marching toward a life I hadn't picked. The hardest part? I didn't have anyone I could talk to. Not really. Daddy would have listened. He always saw more than he said, but he'd passed 2 summers before. My sisters, they already had husbands and matching talsats. And Caroline, she was gone. Back to Atlanta. So, it was just me. And that voice inside, soft but steady, you don't have to do this. But Lord, the guilt. It sat on my chest like a sack of flour. I was raised to be agreeable, to be the good girl. And here I was, thinking about letting everyone down. That's the thing they don't tell you when you start choosing yourself. It doesn't always feel strong. Sometimes it feels like betrayal. And still, I kept thinking if I go through with it just to make everybody else happy, what happens to me? I remember the way the clock stopped ticking. Not really, of course, but in my mind, that's how it felt. Like time just held its breath. It was the night before the wedding. I'd tried on the dress one last time. Ivory lace, long sleeves, pearls all up the back, just the way Mama dreamed it. Everyone said I looked like a picture straight out of Southern living. I stood in front of the mirror, my hands frozen on my waist, and thought, well, I guess this is it. But there was no joy in it. Not even peace. Just silence. Deep, hollow silence. Mama was in the next room laying out her dress and humming hymns like nothing was wrong. Aunt Ruth was on the phone again, giggling with the cousins about the menu. The house smelled like hairspray and starch and lemon pie. And me? I was dying a little. Quietly, I sat down on the edge of my bed, still wearing that gown, and looked at my hands. They didn't feel like mine. And out of nowhere, I whispered out loud, so soft I could barely hear it myself, I can't do this. It came out like a confession. And the moment I said it, the tears came. Lord have mercy, not polite ones. Big, gulpin, rugged sobs. The kind that sound like they've been living inside you for years. That was the moment. It wasn't grand or cinematic. No thunder, no music swell. Just me, in a bedroom lit by a single lamp, sobbing into lace sleeves, realizing that I had built my whole future on what other people wanted for me, not what I wanted for me. I heard Mama walking down the hall. I wiped my face quick and stood up straight. But she opened the door without knocking, saw the dress, the tears, the look in my eyes, and she just froze. You're not going through with it, are you? She said. Not accusing, not crying, just tired. Real tired. I shook my head. She sat down beside me real slow, like the weight of the moment was too much for her knees. Then she said the one thing I never expected. I always thought you'd do something different. I just didn't know how to help you get there. I stared at her, stunned. For the first time, I saw the girl she must have once been, full of fire, maybe, before the babies and biscuits and church fake sales. Maybe she'd silenced her own dreams, just like I was about to. And then, she did something I'll never forget. She took my hand and said, "Go, do what you have to do. I'll handle the family." I left the next morning, didn't even pack the whole suitcase. Took a bus to Atlanta with the library brochure in one hand and a heart still beating, like it might leap out my chest. I didn't know what was waiting for me, but I knew what I was leaving behind, a life that wasn't mine. I lost a lot that day. Respect from some. Raymond's tenderness. My place at the table on Sundays for a while. I lost the version of myself that everyone loved, the agreeable, well-behaved, perfectly planning bride. But what I gained, oh child, I gained a voice. And that voice, it carried me through every hard day that came after. The hardest part wasn't leaving, it was what came after. The silence, the space, the way the world kept turning like nothing had happened, while inside me, it felt like everything had split clean in two. I moved into a little room above a bookstore in Atlanta. Nothing fancy, just 4 walls, 1 window, and a mattress that squeaked if you even breathed wrong. My first night there, I sat on the floor eating canned peaches with a plastic spoon, listening to cars hum down Peachtree Street like the city had somewhere to be, and I didn't. That was the first time it really hit me. I'd done it. I'd stepped out of the life that was already laid out for me. And Lord, I was scared to death. There was no one to tell me what to do. No one calling me for supper. No church bells. No mama fussing. Just me and the echo of my own decisions. The job at the library didn't come right away. I spent a few weeks waiting tables, getting burned on coffee pots, and missing the last bus home. I was tired, broke, and for the first time, invisible. Folks walked past me like I wasn't anybody. And maybe I wasn't, not yet. I didn't know how to be in the world as just Edna. Not someone's fiancée. Not someone's daughter. Just me. I thought freedom would feel like a wind in my hair, like those movies where the girl drives off into the sunset with a smile. But it felt more like floating, no anchor, no map, just drifting in a sea of what now. Sundays were the worst. I'd wake up missing the sound of Mama in the kitchen, missing the weight of a hymnal in my hands, missing even the things I'd wanted to escape. That's the thing no one tells you about starting over. You don't just lose the bad parts. You lose the comfort, too. You lose the rhythm. I remember staring at myself in the bathroom mirror one morning, eyes puffy from crying, hair flat from sleep. And I thought, is this what you gave it all up for? That question sat with me like a brick in my gut. Day after day, I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel brave. I felt like a fool with a half-packed suitcase and no one waiting at the other end. But somehow, I kept going, just one breath at a time. The library finally hired me, part-time at first, shelving books, helping kids with their summer reading lists. I'd run my fingers along the spines like they were old friends. And for a few quiet hours a day, I didn't feel so lost. Words studied me. Stories reminded me I wasn't the first girl to lose her way. My faith in myself, it was paper thin. My faith in people, flickering like a candle in the wind. I didn't trust my own voice yet, didn't believe I was enough on my own, but I showed up every day, quietly, unseen, but present. That was the season of emptiness, of unbecoming, not broken, just quiet, like the soil after the storm, still, damp, waiting. Not yet blooming, but not dead either. I wasn't the girl in the long dress anymore. I wasn't the good daughter, the chosen bride. I was a question, a space between chapters. And somehow in all that silence, I started to listen. It started with a child's question. Just 4 words, soft, curious, innocent. Do you like books? She couldn't have been more than 7. Pigtails, scraped knees, jelly on her fingers. She'd wandered into the library one afternoon while her mama was paying bills at the counter. I was sorting a stack of returns, worn-out fairy tales and cookbooks from the 60s, when she stood there staring at me like I held the secrets of the universe. Do you like books? She asked again, tilting her little head. And I looked down at her, this tiny soul with her whole life still in front of her, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I smiled, not a polite one, a real one, the kind that starts somewhere behind your ribs. I said, "Darling, books saved my life." She blinked, then grinned wide like I'd just told her the moon was made of candy. "Mine too," she whispered, and then skipped off toward the picture books like her heart was on fire. That moment, that silly, small exchange, it cracked something open in me. I started showing up to work a little earlier after that. Stayed late. Took extra shifts. I organized the kids' corner, added labels to the shelves, even brought in a stack of my own old poetry books from home. One day, I caught myself humming while putting away biographies, and it startled me. I hadn't realized I'd stopped humming after I left Savannah. The loneliness didn't vanish. The ache didn't disappear. But there was, light now, little pockets of it. The way the sun poured through the high windows mid-morning, the smell of old paper, the quiet sound of pages turning all around me. I started writing again, too, just small things. Thoughts, snatches of poems, memories. I kept them in a little leather notebook I found in the staff closet. No one else wanted it, said it smelled like mildew. But to me, it smelled like a new beginning. One afternoon, I helped a teenage boy with his college application essay. He was struggling with the part where he had to describe a challenge you've overcome. He looked up at me and said, "I ain't got anything like that." I chuckled, not at him, but because I knew the feeling. I leaned in close and said, "You've lived 17 years in this world, haven't you? That's challenge enough. Now tell me what you've learned." And in that moment, I realized I did have something to give. Not advice, not wisdom wrapped in a bow, just presence, patience, a soft voice in a loud world. I still had nights where I'd lie awake wondering if I made a mistake, if I should have stayed, married, safe, expected. But every time I saw a child wrap themselves in a story, every time I helped someone find a book that felt like home, I felt my roots grow a little deeper. Hope didn't come back all at once. It came in teaspoons, in shared glances, in library cards slid across a desk, in jelly sticky fingers and whispered secrets between shelves. And for the first time in a long time, I stopped waiting for a big, loud sign that I was on the right path. I just let the quiet guide me. And Lord, it was enough. It happened on a Tuesday. Funny how the biggest moments of your life don't come with fireworks or fanfare, just a sky that don't look any different from yesterday. I was cleaning out a drawer I hadn't opened in years, the one in the bottom of that old roll-top desk I brought with me from Savannah. It stuck like always, and I had to jiggle it a bit, same way Daddy used to when he didn't want to deal with the taxes. Inside was a mess of things I'd kept too long. Ticket stubs, church bulletins, a photo of me and Raymond smiling in front of the gas station where he used to work weekends. And right there, tucked between two faded recipe cards, was the wedding invitation. Ours, yellowed at the edges, the ink a little smudged from moisture or maybe regret. I just stared at it. For a long time, I hadn't thought about that girl in a while, the one who'd printed those cards with shaking hands, trying to make everybody proud, trying to convince herself it was love. I held that piece of cardstock like it might burn me, and then I cried. Not the same way I'd cried that night in the lace dress. This time, it wasn't grief. It was release. You see, I realized in that moment, I'd never really forgiven myself. Not for leaving, not for breaking his heart, not for being the one who said no when the world expected yes. And even all these years later, through jobs, new friendships, a whole life rebuilt, some part of me was still waiting for someone to say, "It's okay. You were right to choose you." So I said it to myself. Out loud, I said, "Edna May, it's time." I folded that invitation up, real gentle, like I was tucking in a child, and I walked out onto the back porch, bare feet on warm wood, and set it in the old tin fire pit I used for kindling. I didn't watch it burn. I just turned back inside, and I felt lighter, like a window had been opened that I didn't even know was locked. That night, I made tea chamomile, the kind Mama used to brew when one of us girls was too upset to speak, and I sat down with my notebook, wrote one line. I chose to live. That was it. But it felt like a whole chapter turned. I no longer needed anyone's permission to feel at peace. I didn't need to explain the choices I made with a trembling voice. I chose. I stayed. I survived. And now, I was free. Not perfect. Not whole in the way movies promise, but whole in the way that matters. I carried my scars with grace. I stopped apologizing for my softness, my strength, my silence, my fire. I didn't know then where the rest of the road would lead. But I finally understood I didn't need a map to walk it. Just my 2 feet, my breath, and a heart that still had songs to sing. That night, for the first time in years, I slept through till morning. You know, when you get to be my age, folks think you've got it all figured out. They sit across from you at Thanksgiving, ask you how you stayed strong, what you would have done different, how you knew what was right. And I always smile, pour a little more sweet tea, and say, "Baby, I didn't. I just kept going. Truth is, there ain't no one moment where life suddenly makes sense. It doesn't come wrapped up in a neat little bow. It's more like a quilt, made from scraps of joy, patches of grief, seams held together by faith and stubbornness. When I look back at that 20-year-old girl, the one with jasmine in her hair and fear in her bones, I don't feel sorry for her. I honor her. She was brave in ways I couldn't name back then. She said no when it would have been easier to say yes. She walked away, not because she didn't care, but because she finally started to. And that, I think, is what I've learned most in this life. Sometimes loving yourself will disappoint other people. And that's all right. You will survive the disapproval. What you might not survive is betraying that quiet voice inside you. The one that whispers, "This ain't it, baby. Not for you." I used to think the goal was to be loved by everyone. Now, I just want to be able to sit with myself in the quiet and feel peace. I want to walk through my days with my shoulders dropped and my heart open, not twisted up trying to please folks who don't even know my middle name. If you're listening to this and you're still waiting for permission, for a sign, for someone to tell you you're allowed, well, maybe this is it. Maybe I'm telling you. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be fearless or loud or polished. You just have to be honest with yourself. And honey, that's more than enough. Life will hurt you. Oh, it will. But it'll also hold you in the most unexpected ways. In a book that knows your story. In a stranger's smile. In the quiet clink of a spoon in your teacup at sunrise. And somewhere along the way, between the hard parts and the sweet ones, you'll start to see yourself clearer. Not as who you were told to be, but who you are. And let me tell you something else. It's never too late. I don't care if you're 20, 40, or pushing 80 like me. If there's a little voice in you saying, more, you owe it to yourself to listen. Maybe you don't need to burn down your whole life like I did. Maybe all you need is to take one small step. Say the thing you've been too scared to say. Leave the table where you're not fed. Maybe it's time to stop waiting. Just maybe. Well, if you've stayed with me this long, bless your heart. I reckon I've done gone and shared more than I ever meant to. Funny how stories do that. They pull you in gentle, like a tide, and before you know it, you're standing knee-deep in memory. But I'm glad I told it. Not for sympathy. Not for attention. Just because, well, sometimes you gotta speak the truth out loud to remember it's real. You know, this story, mine, it ain't just about a broken engagement or a runaway bride. It's about finding your own rhythm in a world that wants you to march to someone else's drum. It's about pausing long enough to ask yourself, do I even want this life I'm chasing? And then, if you're real brave, changing course. I don't regret much, truly. Oh, I miss people. Some I let go, some who let me go. I wonder sometimes what would have happened if I'd stayed. If I'd said yes. If I'd had babies with blue eyes and Raymond's calm voice. But then I think about all the pages I got to turn that I never would have known existed. People I met. Books I loved. Even the long, quiet nights with just the sound of the wind outside and a pen in my hand, they gave me something marriage might not have. And yet, some nights I still wonder. I still dream. I still think of him. Not with longing, really. More like tenderness. There's a difference, you know. I saw him once, maybe 15 years ago. I was visiting Savannah for a cousin's funeral. I passed the old gas station where he used to work, and there he was leaning on the counter, older, grayer, but still with that soft look in his eyes. He saw me. I know he did. But neither of us waved. We just paused. And I swear to you, in that breath, I felt something. A kind of quiet understanding. Not regret. Not hurt. Just a memory. Shared between two people who were once young and scared and trying their best. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder, does he ever think of me too? Does he tell his story, and is my name still somewhere in it? And I guess that's the question I want to leave with you. Not about him, but about you. What are you carrying that you haven't said out loud? What's that quiet truth inside you that's still waiting to be spoken? Maybe it's time. Maybe it's not too late. Maybe you've got your own drawer full of old invitations and half-written poems and choices you never quite made. And maybe, just maybe, your story's still being written. So tell me, sugar, if you could go back and say one thing to your 20-year-old self, what would it be? And better yet, what would they say back? I'll be right here rocking on this porch, sipping my tea, listening to the wind rustle the magnolia leaves. And sometimes, just sometimes, it feels like he remembers too.